Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, between a rock and a hard place. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. As a reminder, the ITC Conference will be in late November, November 20th through the 22nd. So make sure you guys get your ticket if you have not already done so. We're still curating the list of speakers. We've already got a lot of great speakers coming, and we hope to get even more. So let's go ahead and jump in. We've talked about this before, but the reality is that Bitcoin is essentially trading between two very key levels that it seems to not get a durable move past. One of which, of course, as you guys know, is the bear market resistance band. Bitcoin continues to get rejected by it to the upside. But to the downside, it's the 200-week moving average. And what you'll notice is that the first time we approached the bear market resistance band, we barely got to it. The first time we approached the 200-week moving average, we didn't even get all the way there. The second time we approached the bull market support band or the bear market resistance band, we got through it. We had a fake out above it. The second time we approached the 200-week moving average, we actually got below it. Again, a fake out. So what's happening for Bitcoin right now is that it's ping-ponging between the 200-week moving average and the bear market resistance band. Now, what's fascinating is that this is all lining up with the 4-year cycle, right? It all lines up fairly well in the sense of how the markets tend to play out. We normally get lows in like late June, early July, as you can see in the summer of 22, the summer of 2018. Sorry, that's February 2018, this summer of 2018. And you'll notice that after Bitcoin gets down there to say sweeping a prior low or even going lower, it then bounces back up in July. And if you look at monthly returns for Bitcoin in midterm years, you'll see that in 2026, so far Bitcoin's up about 9%. In 2022, it was up 20. In 2018, it was up almost 40. Now in 2014, it was slightly negative. So it's not to say that it can't be negative, but usually in midterm years, July isn't as bad of a month as the month that surround it. Look at May and June in midterm years. This year, it was negative 3.5% and negative 20%. In 2022, it was negative 17% and negative 38%. 2018 was negative 21 and negative 20. And then 2014, we actually had a positive May and only a slightly red June, but then all the red, still eventually came, and we did go lower. If you look on the other side of July, right, the other side of it, look at 2022. After a green July, August and September were red. In 2018, after a green July, August and September were red. And in 2014, July was red, and then August and September were also red. So when you think about like how this could play out, I think that the time frame for Bitcoin to stay strong will be ending within 2 to 4 weeks. You have this brief window of weakness that opens after the summer low, late June, early July. After that low, it opens up. It allows Bitcoin to head higher. But as we get into that August-September timeframe, we're probably going to give back those gains. Just like in 2022, we rallied in July and gave back those gains into August and September. The rally did last through early August. We didn't really get the correction until about mid-August. In 2018, the correction actually started in late July. But the point is the gains that we had in July were given back in the August to September timeframe. So if we were to just kind of extend this out, the bear market resistance band and the 200-week moving average, you're essentially looking at a scenario here where Bitcoin keeps bouncing back and forth between them until it's forced to make a decision. And what I'm saying is that if the 4-year cycle were to remain intact, in the sense of like the seasonal weakness that we normally see, the expectation, although it doesn't have to play out like this, but the baseline expectation, I would assume, would be that it actually breaks down a little bit later on. It breaks down. And then from that level, and it breaks down around the time that the stock market gets a 10 to 20% drop. And that's what we saw in 2014, 2018, and 2022. And then from that breakdown, you form the market cycle bottom, and then we go into the next bull market. If we don't break down by the end of the year, then I would probably have to pivot that view and say, all right, look, we had the time to go lower and it just didn't happen. And now it's time to pivot. There's nothing wrong with pivoting. And I even told you guys that back over here. I was like, I don't think February is the low. But even if it's not the low, we're going to come back down and retest it in the summer like we normally do. So it's hard to say for sure about 57K. I mean, some of the on-chain indicators have now triggered, but still a lot haven't. I would think we're going to at least retest it, probably go a little bit lower later in the year to fully reset the on-chain indicators. But if we haven't done that by the end of the year, then I would defer to the time-based capitulation and say, all right, the bull market's back at that point. But that's not where we are right now, right? We're in the period of bouncing back and forth between these two levels because there hasn't really been a great reason to durably go up when you have, you know, this midterm year weak seasonality, but also there hasn't been the catalyst necessarily to take us down, especially considering that the S&P hasn't really entered into that correction yet, right? The correction that Bitcoin had when it bottomed out in February sort of preceded this larger drop in stocks. We haven't had that yet. And if you guys remember, what I said was expect a small drop, a shallow drop by stocks in June, followed by a move back up in July, and then look for it to top in August or September. And you might say, well, why do I keep saying August or September? If you look at the last 3 midterm years in 2018, you can see the S&P found a top in August. If you look at 2018, you'll see that it found a top in September. And if you look at 2014, you'll see that it topped out in September. So my argument is just simply, I think we're going to see a top in August or September. The S&P will then drop, and then Bitcoin will then drop, and then that will allow the sort of that market cycle bottom to form. And that is my guess as to how this plays out. But in the short term, Bitcoin is stuck between a rock and a hard place. And until we really break through one of these, it's just it's a waiting game. It's like 2018, right? Like in 2018, we weren't getting squeezed between the 200-week moving average at all, right? The 200-week moving average was a lot lower. But the point is the setup was the same, right? You had a low in February and June, just like you have it over here. And back then, it did eventually break down. But back then, it took until November to break down. Right? If you look at how much higher the 20-week moving average was than the range low back then, it was about 40% higher. Now, from the June low, it was only about 20% higher. So when I say that Bitcoin in 2026 is just a less volatile version of 2018, you can see what I mean. Like, look at this, how the lows are forming around the same time. The high in May formed around the same time. The low in the summer around the same time. And then you get your counter trend rally again around the same time. And in 2018, that counter trend rally persisted through the end of July. And then we gave everything back. And then the market got even more boring for basically the rest of the year. Then we had our big liquidity event in Q4. It reset all the on-chain indicators. It was the last thing to go, and then the rest is history. Now, the biggest counterpoint is that a lot of the people that you would expect to sell Bitcoin in a capitulation low arguably never even bought Bitcoin this past cycle because we topped on apathy. The difficult thing is that the only example in history where Bitcoin did go through this apathetic top was 2019, and it ended on a price-based capitulation due to the pandemic. And so this is kind of the first test of like, well, what if you don't? I mean, I'm not calling for a pandemic, which is why I'm deferring to time-based capitulation. We'll see what happens, but that's the best example we have, and it ended with this more black swan event that you couldn't really predict. But those are my views. Again, between a rock and a hard place for Bitcoin. The conference in November is set in November so that it's around the theoretical market cycle bottom, give or take, right? So I hope to see you guys there. Make sure you guys get your ticket. Thank you guys for tuning in, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.